Thanks so much. And finally, we just want to take this opportunity to thank those at SENIA for coming today and for sharing their expertise and experiences. I'm going to pass it straight on over to April, and she'll introduce herself and start. Thank you so much, April.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. It's nice to see you all on my screen. I'd like to give a special hello to Nikki, who I got to meet in person. I was in Bangkok recently, a couple years ago. So hi, Nikki. The rest of you that I have not yet met, I hope to be able to meet in person at some point. All right. If you could give me a thumbs up once you see my screen. Great. Thanks, John. Okay. Just a very quick intro to me. I am a SENIA International Board member, also on the board of SENIA Europe, because I'm located here in Switzerland. Started off in the US in the middle of nowhere, town of 2,000 people, moved a little bit less out of nowhere into Milwaukee, Wisconsin soon after that. And then very early on in my life, moved to Paris, which was my first international immigrant experience, which kind of whet the appetite for living abroad. These are my people, my husband and my child, who we've been here in Switzerland now for 11 years. So let's jump right in. I want to make sure I honor everyone's time. And introduce to you SENIA if SENIA is something that needs to be introduced to you. Some of you I know are very well acquainted with SENIA, and some of you I'm very excited to introduce it to you. Our vision at SENIA is quite simple. We simply want to live in an inclusive world. Our mission digs down a little bit deeper, and we are here to help empower our global community to connect and learn and advocate for one another. SENIA itself has local chapters all over the world. We're adding more and more all the time. And many of you have been parts of these local chapters, and we're very happy to see some of you here. We even have member schools. There are about 6 more to add to this list already. We just celebrated our 50th member school in February, which was really exciting for us. And the purpose is to make sure everyone feels like they have a community to talk about neurodivergence and disability, those that are parents and teachers, and hoping to connect and not feel quite so alone. So for me, what would be really helpful is if you could simply add into the chat very quickly when we say waterfall. We're all going to do this at once. Into the chat, if you can list where you're located, and if you are a parent, a teacher, or an advocate. And if you're all of those things, please put all of those things. Okay, so get yours loaded up. And when I say waterfall, we're going to go ahead and look at those all together. All right. Waterfall. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Okay. First, I want to introduce to you a friend of SENIA. And one of the questions that we often get at SENIA is, how do we address someone that has a disability? Do we call them disabled? And these questions always come from a place of wanting to understand. So we had Emily Ladau, author of Demystifying Disability, keynote our last virtual conference at SENIA. And she answered this question along with many others that we might have had. And we'd like to show you a short segment of that keynote. So here we are. Fingers crossed for all good sound and viewing. Here we go. No. I'll keep trying. I will persist in getting this to work, I promise.
Hi everyone, I am so excited to be with all of you. I am, as Karen said, Emily Liddell. I will give a quick description of myself for accessibility purposes. I am a white woman. I have brown curly hair pulled to the side in a ponytail, wearing big black rimmed glasses, and I've got on an orange dress that has some lace sleeves on it. I am just thrilled to be with all of you and to talk more about disability, which leads me to the one thing that you are not able to see in the screen, which is that I am a wheelchair user. So I use a wheelchair to get around. I was born with a physical disability called Larson syndrome, which is a genetic joint and muscle disorder. So disability has always been a part of my life, a part of my perspective, a part of what makes me who I am, and a part of how people perceive me. And so today I am so excited to be able to dive into this topic that defines so much of my life and that I am so passionate about educating about. And I can't think of a better person to be able to chat with than Karen. And I'm just so thankful to be having this discussion.
Fabulous. Fabulous, Emily. Thank you. I came across you, Emily, through your fabulous book entitled Demystifying Disability, which for me, where I did it as a book club with my virtual book club group. And I just found what I really liked was very, very frank, very, very straight talking. And I loved that. It was very simple and easy. It was easy to read. It was so accessible. And in that book, the first thing you talk about, you say disability is not a dirty word. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I am so glad that this is how we are setting the stage. I worry that when I talk about disability, I have already lost people simply by saying the word disability. I think that there is a fear and a discomfort around using the word disability. We have been taught that it is a bad thing, that it is negative, taboo, shameful. So we push that word into the corner and we don't acknowledge it. But I want to be very clear. Disability is not a bad word. Disability is very much just part of the natural fabric of our society. So when I say that I am a disabled person or a person with a disability, I am not putting myself down. In fact, I am just naming a part of what informs so much of my day-to-day experience. It's an identity that I am proud to claim. There's a history behind it. There's a community, a culture behind it. So often, especially in educational settings, we're told to avoid the word disability. We're told that it is not empowering for students. But I want us to reframe that and reclaim that word, because we so often switch over to words like special, or we switch to words like challenge. I have so many questions about those words. I have so often wondered, what is it that makes my needs or the needs of someone with a disability special? If you want me to be honest with you, I can say that I have special needs, but it's going to be that I want you to fan me, I want you to feed me grapes and treat me like a queen. I mean, those are my special needs. But if you want to talk about my other needs, those are human needs. And maybe we say something like differently abled. But I have a question about that too, because doesn't everybody have different abilities? Somebody is really good at math. Somebody is really good at singing. Somebody can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute or twist themselves up like a pretzel. Everybody has different abilities. So why do we shy away from saying disability when that's what it is? We use euphemisms instead, but we're just dancing around a reality, and it's not a bad reality. It's a fact of life. So I hope as moving forward in this conversation, we will get more comfortable with using the word disability and recognizing that it's not a niche issue. More than 1 billion people around the world have some type of a disability. Let's embrace that terminology.
With that leading us into our understanding that disability is not a dirty word, let's quickly look at this idea of why this word has become so negative. And so we need to understand that for most of history and what still continues into this time in our world is that the medical model of disability has been our real understanding and our framework for disability. And that idea is that something needs to be broken in order for us to fix it. And that's where disability has come from such a negative place, and what we need and are working at reframing. So from this model, you can see in the center of the circle that the focus is on the idea that the problem is with the individual with the disability. And when this is the worldview a society holds, you hear people saying things like, she is confined to a wheelchair, rather than she's a wheelchair user, like we just heard Emily say. Or a focus on what a student can't do, rather than what they can do. So the intention of the medical model is not to say that medication or that the medical field and educational support are any way negative on their own, but to show us how the individual's problems are the focus rather than looking more widely at society. So another example to illustrate the medical model is that if you have an infection or a broken bone, you go to the doctor to have a specific remedy to fix that problem. But if this is the same philosophy that's applied to disabilities, individuals identified as having a disability need to be treated and changed or made, quote, normal. It also generalizes and does not take into any consideration that everyone's an individual. It assumes that everyone with autism is the same, or that everyone with Down syndrome is the same, just like a broken arm presents in the same way. Right? So our friend and one of SENIA's biggest supporters, Dr. Stephen Shore, who's an autism advocate, but also on the spectrum himself, he says, and his quote gets morphed into lots of other quotes because it's just so good, is that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So this is why I find it so important for us to help educate and help people understand that disability is not a dirty word. And Dr. Shore himself would advise us to throw the medical model out the window and move to thinking about the world from a different point of view, which is the social model. So in comparison to the medical model, the social model of disability has the worldview that society and the world as a whole is creating disabling factors that make it difficult for many people to live to their full potential. So therefore, at the center of the equation is not the person, but society itself. And so you can see arrows pointing out in this model, which means that this type of worldview, and it has us understand that factors in the world, such as separate services or poor job prospects and inaccessible transportation, further disable a person's chance of being an equal member of our society. I'd like to give a little shout out to our friend Nicole, who's already here in the call. I'm glad you're here, Nix. Nicole is also on the SENIA Europe board of directors. And I distinctly remember getting messages and photos from my friend Nicole when she's out with friends and not able to use the bathroom, use the toilet in the restaurant because it wasn't accessible for her. And then it became her problem. And it became the problem of the person with the disability to make themselves fit into a world that wasn't meeting her needs. And we at SENIA we want to make that change. We want to make sure that everyone hears this message, especially in our global context, and for those of us that are in international schools. So take this picture, for example. Why do we even need stairs there when everyone can use that ramp? So the social model seeks to change the world and society rather than the person with the disability. And we see it as the role of teachers to start moving the thinking from the old-fashioned medical model to the social model. And we know there can be quite a few cultural barriers to this idea, but we truly believe that international schools are best placed to help move this thinking forward. So just on your own or in the chat, because we're pressed for time, let's just take 20 to 30 seconds and think of some examples of hopefully the social model of disability that you might be seeing in your community or your school. If you can't think of anything from the social model, you can think of the medical model. Mr. Springer, I see your face. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Nicole. We're going to keep moving, and we will have time at the end to have conversations about these things also. So we're going to stick on this topic of terminology. And let's dive into it. That words can change so quickly and rapidly. So we have to take our cues from those that have disabilities and the words that they would like us to use. The key here is, when in doubt, ask the person how they would like you to refer to them and their disability. Think of it like pronouns. Some of the most important words that we can be using in our context right now is neurodiversity, neurodivergence, and disability. We're moving away from words that are euphemisms, like Emily was talking about, and being very clear with our language. Right now, these words are being changed in our context. And neurodivergence itself refers to a difference in neurological development. And because I'm a numbers person, I found these statistics very interesting, and I thought you might as well. But it's important to understand that these are the percentages of the world population, not just of the population of those with disabilities. These are numbers we can't ignore. This is a true fabric of our society. And now I'm going to jump into the things that can make people very uncomfortable. And I appreciated at the beginning that there was conversation about leaning into the uncomfortable, because oftentimes we avoid the words that we don't want people to use. But we're going to call them out, because it's important to say what the words are that we need to avoid. So here are some of the words that in the learning support disability community, we need to avoid these words. Lots of these were names of old diagnoses that have really hurtful connotations for people. And most of these you know, but some of them we're still using and we need to change. we need to change using a diagnosis to label something we're doing in a positive way. I hear people frequently say, I went OCD to cleaning up my classroom today. Use the word that you actually mean. The one that I'm working really hard on eliminating from my vocabulary is crazy. If you have a word that you're trying to eliminate from your vocabulary right now, whether or not it's in the neurodivergent or disability world, share it with us now. It gives you a little accountability to call it out. If there's a word you're trying to remove, go ahead and drop that in the chat. The one thing that I try to remind myself and those around me is that we only know better from this moment forward, and then we can do better. We only know what we know from this moment. And in that light, there are some people that have had some very public moments of using inappropriate language. Some people have called it out immediately and made changes. Some people, like the Black Eyed Peas, took them 11 years to re-record their inappropriately titled song. So think about which one of those people you want to be. We also want to call out the fact that there are a lot of things going around on Instagram and TikTok that try to make light of or try to show those with disabilities as inspirational. But one of the more important words that can be difficult to understand from where you sit is ableism. So the definition of ableism is the belief or practice that devalue and discriminate against people with disabilities, assuming that they need to be fixed, and putting the onus on those with disabilities to adapt. We're back to that medical model. One of my favorite TED Talks ever is by Stella Young. And the late Stella Young coined the term inspiration porn in 2014 in her TED Talk, where she describes situations just like some of those videos that you see on Instagram or TikTok, where she says, I am not your inspiration. Thank you very much. If you have a moment this weekend, look Stella up and watch her TED Talk. Let's have a quick pause to reflect. What are you going to do? What's your line going to be when you hear people using some of these words? We hear them all the time. How are you going to correct yourself? And how are you going to help those around you improve their language? Go ahead and drop that in the chat. Thank you, Christina, for putting that TED Talk in there. Rama Mine recently has also been modeling the correct language. It's also a bit more comfortable to avoid some conflict. Yeah. Thank you all. I want to end this portion of it, of the talk, reflecting on a quote that Lori heard just this week from the board chair of the Special Olympics, Timothy Shriver. And I find this extremely powerful, so powerful, I'm just going to read it out. We believe the central impediment to the implementation of effective inclusive education is the capabilities of a trained teacher workforce. You cannot ask teachers to become includers in their schools or to manage children with complex learning needs without training. Training to me does not mean formal professional development. It can, but it also means having these conversations, bringing up the conversations in order to move things forward. We have to set everyone else up for success with the intention that it's about the students. It's 100% about the students. But if we're setting people up for failure, it's also about the students. And they're the ones that are going to suffer. So let's leave this day thinking carefully about our language, thinking about how we are able to support each other moving forward, and how we can end our time together today having a conversation about being uncomfortable with this conversation and this language. Before I let you go, I want to tell you quickly about SENIA a little bit more. One of our biggest missions in the last few years has been setting up training courses for teaching assistants and teachers. So we have a SENIA certified teaching assistant course, which has 7 modules. And we also have the first educator course, which is aimed at teachers to help them understand all the facets of the learning support teaching community. Most recently, and it's just started, we have a level 2 teacher course, which allows teachers to take a deeper dive into those areas that they have most interest in. We have a virtual conference coming up in November called SENIA Unplugged. And we're really excited about this new format, which isn't going to be all recorded videos, but we're going to have live sessions with our keynote speakers and some of our invited speakers. So put that on your calendar. And our next in-person conference will be in Phnom Penh in Cambodia in March of next year. All right. So let's jump into a Q&A. We're lucky enough to have quite a few board members. We have the executive director of SENIA on the call, as well as the, Andrea, what's your title?
Deputy Executive Director.
Okay, thank you. And we have quite a few others that are big helpers and all of our doers here on the call from SENIA. So let's jump into some questions, and I'm not going to be the only one to answer these questions because we have so many great minds here. So let's jump right into it. You're welcome to just unmute if you have a question you would like to address to the group.
Yes, I have a question for y'all. How does SENIA incorporate intersectionality within their practice specifically? Or what I mean by that is like exploring the ways queer, disabled, people of color experience or like advocate for disability justice and experience oppression through that like intersectional lens. What kind of work has SENIA done with that?
Thank you for that question. We are working really hard to help the community explore this intersectionality, and so much so that one of our keynote speakers for the virtual conference is going to do that quite specifically. Last year also, Emily was one of our keynote speakers who helped talk about this subject as well. We know for a fact that the statistics are that people that fall on the autism spectrum have a higher rate of being queer. And we know this is a fact, right? So it's a really important topic, and I really appreciate you bringing it up. If any of the rest of you would like to chime in, please do.
Yeah, I will. We've also had Black advocates and individuals who have come and been keynote speakers for us, experiencing that intersectionality of Black and autistic. That was Jason Arday last year as a keynote. We've also had members of AIELOC be part of our podcasts, and Joel and Kevin have both presented for us, Daniel Wickner as well. We believe that we can't be doing DEIJ work without including everyone who is in the marginalized population. And so we try to include as many people as we can in our presentations, to ensure that that intersectionality is being spoken of. Angeline Au, who is here today, has also been a keynote speaker and an invited speaker at our past conferences. And she has taught us well from that as well.
Mm-hmm. Emily, if you or Emily or Angeline would like to say something, please jump in.
I was just going to say, so when I asked the exact same question when Lori called me for a keynote, and she was totally prepared and committed and ready to explain how that really aligns with the SENIA vision and mission. And I will also say that on my end, I felt really supported speaking for the organization. I never felt like there was any sort of censorship or fear about, because I do LGBTQ work, for those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet. I didn't feel that SENIA was trying to ever hinder anything that I was going to say or put parameters around me. I felt really, really supported and welcome. So.
Thank you.
I'd like to echo that too. Thanks, April and Emily, and also what I value about SENIA is how you've evolved also. Like, so you've changed, even your name has evolved over time, and you have conferences in many different places to increase accessibility, and that's for me is something that resonates and is aligned, I think, with my personal values as well.
Thank you. Any other, if you're ready to move on to another question, if anyone has it, love to hear from you. I would love to, as you're thinking of questions, I would love to hear if anyone like to elaborate on language questions you might have. This is a very safe space. It's okay to ask a question in a way that you might be concerned about asking it in any other space. Sometimes it's just really hard to think about, am I formulating that question properly? Am I saying it the right way? And it's okay to ask those questions here now if you would like to. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say, because we're predominantly international schools group here, and like things like both language and intersectionality can also vary by as far as what it is possible to do based on context that you're in and what country you're in, and there's variances on. I mean, there's countries where a lot of diagnoses aren't recognized still, or where there's a lot more stigma, and that can be also a lot of our students and educators who are coming from different international contexts also carry that stigma. So how can we destigmatize those things in international contexts where outside of the school walls, there's still a lot of stigma.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that a lot of you have had to deal with that. Anyone have any thoughts? I don't want to pretend I'm the expert on this. I'd love to hear what anyone else has to say. I know that those of you that work in the queer community and LGBTQ plus community know very well that safety comes first, right? And a lot of you that have worked in different Asian contexts, African contexts, understand that disability and diagnosis is at a different place in understanding than other places in the world. And we have to be very careful of understanding and pushing. I had a question recently. I can't remember the context we were in, but I believe it was at our last conference in Ho Chi Minh, where the question was, how can we push parents to accept their child's diagnosis? And you absolutely cannot. Everyone is at a different place in their journey. You have to respect everybody's place on that journey and meet them where they are. And we have talked about this a lot of times in the SENIA context about meeting people where they are. I have a feeling that AIELOC also talks about this, meeting people where they are, because if you don't, you're going to be pushing people into a defensive corner. And in order to make change, go ahead, Lori.
Sorry, I would also say we're meeting schools where they are. So when someone becomes a SENIA member school, we don't expect them to be fully inclusive, whatever that means. But what we do expect is that they share our mission and they want to move forward. And so we try to meet them where they're at and support them along their own journey. And that is in the context of their own countries and school locations as well.
Yeah, we've decided that's the inclusive way to meet schools, so we can help them, wherever they're at on their journey to make progress and move in the right direction. However, there's also a little bit of frustration that goes along with that because we're wanting places to move faster and meet the needs of more students quickly. There are very few schools in the international school context that can meet the needs of all learners. And it's extremely frustrating and it's not inclusive. So although we want to meet everybody where they are, we want to start pushing to get more schools on board.
Can I throw out a different question on intersectionality that's a little different?
Sure.
I just on like I'm aware, especially in international schools, but globally, like most of the research on, particularly on neurodivergence, has been centered on white boys, and ones from American, UK, Australia. So we don't have there's a lack of awareness of what neurodivergence looks like in girls and in kids from other cultures, where we're not identifying them as well, and often doing the things that used to be done to neurodivergent kids in the US and UK that are white to other kids, as far as just saying that's just their behavior and they're not recognizing that it's a neurodivergence. And how do we expand growth and knowledge of what neurodivergence looks like in a lot of different profiles when the research isn't quite all the way there yet to even give us the evidence?
A great question. I have a presentation. I don't have the exact stats up right now, but the rate of suicidal ideation of females with autism is extremely high, and it is because they've been so misunderstood, and no one is even thinking about that it could be autism. And so the studies are coming out, they're starting, but we've got a long way to go on those. But we have to, we have a course coming up on autism. We have to start recognizing that what the symptoms are or symptoms is a poor choice of word. If we're looking at the medical model, sorry, the social model. But we have to start seeing those signs and recognizing what's happening in the life of a young child or young woman with autism, and start identifying them earlier so they can work out. Yes, characteristics, thank you. See, I'm working on my language all the time as well, and I'm the executive director of SENIA, so I don't always get it right, and I appreciate anyone helping me out.
Thanks, Lori. I appreciate the fact that the research is lacking. I think oftentimes there are so many contexts where we don't need to wait for the research to tell us what we already know. And I from some of the things that I've seen, I live in a country where that people falsely believe is very progressive and is ahead of the curve in so many ways. And their teaching practices are 60 or 70 years behind. And because of that, Switzerland is not alone in that fact. There are a lot of schools and a lot of people that I see in general, the teaching practices are very traditional, teacher-driven, and not student-led. And regardless of what our statistics are, we need to start creating context, learning contexts, where students have more of a voice. And students have more of a say in what it is that they need. And for me, that it can't fall on the shoulders of the students to be the ones that have to do that, right? The teachers are the ones that have to start moving practices forward. I don't have the answer to that happening overnight, and I would love for it to start happening faster than it is. And I feel like SENIA is working very hard at helping to move that needle forward through our educational programs and our coursework. And I know that AIELOC is doing the same thing. And that's what we have in common, is that we have to change mindsets before we can make any progress.
Nicole, do you have something?
Yeah, excuse me. I think that if a school has made a commitment to hire diverse staff that have some of these characteristics, whether they're visible or invisible or neurodiverse, I think that that sets a safer stage for our students to be able to find that person of trust and then begin to maybe become more autonomous and feel like they have their voice. So more than just, oh, we've fulfilled our quota of hiring diverse staff, so we're not going to do anything more about it, but make a real conscious commitment that we're all in this together, so that the comfort and the safety and can then hopefully get translated outside of the school walls into the wider community.
Amen. Yay. Yes, representation is so important for so many reasons, isn't it? Wow, thanks for sharing, Nicole. I'm glad you're here.
You're welcome.
Solon, you're using your hand.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Nicole, for sharing that, because it made me think of my own experience as someone who's queer and autistic, that my workspace, like we talk about meeting the needs for like creating like educational practices, which is extremely important. But then also my workplace isn't designed for neurodivergent people either. So even like trying to function in a staff meeting at 4 p.m. when it's like all of my, autistic characteristics are coming out because I'm overstimulated and it's like disorganized, or there's too much noise, and like all of these things are happening all at once, and I've already had to mask all day. So it's just like I'm done. So it's it's I'm wondering how we can also shift our institutions to just be more inclusive in the way we practice, how we organize things, um, to make space for everybody too. Because I'm noticing, even when I'm offering those changes, of like, oh, can we organize like the meeting in this way, or like use this tool or something, it's met with this like really interesting resistance, right? When it's like, well, we just talked about our, autistic students and our professional development, and I'm not, I didn't disclose this to my colleagues or anything, but I'm just like internally um raging.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering what y'all's take is on that too.
I so hear what you're saying, because I work with lots of staff that are working so hard to create universally designed for learning systems in the classroom, and then completely ignore those same structures when they're working with their staff. Right? And they're requiring that goals from the staff members are all met in exactly the same way. Or staff meetings, like you're talking about, are only allowed to be run in exactly the same way. So we need to give the same information, the same understanding of what is best practice for how people are going to be able to access and understand and take it in for our students and for our adults. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, for sure. I think like the common response for adults is to just deal with it. Like that's what I've been told. Like we're adults, we can just deal with it, not like our students. It's like, yes, and like there's a lot adults have to compromise. And like, why do we have to do that? Because you're perpetuating these ableist systems that only work for some people. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Mm. And Rama brings up a good point too. I mean, the research for adult learning has been quite good for a long period of time. And I feel like a lot of the UDL, the Universal Design for Learning practices, are kind of just like shuffled down from adult learning understanding that kids can direct their learning if we empower them and help them understand themselves as being experts on themselves as learners. But we are not asking our colleagues, how are you learning best? Should somebody be standing at the front of the room talking at you as educators? Probably not the best way to learn. And the very fact that those of you that are sitting in those schools, you all are experts at something. And how frequently are you asked to share your expertise with the staff? It's always outsourced, right? And so I would love to see more schools working to put a spotlight on all the different types of expertise that are already in their schools. Okay, I know we're getting close to the end of our time. Any last questions? If not, those of you in the know, I'll let you wrap things up.
Thank you so much. Rama, would you mind sharing yeah, perfect. Thank you again to April and the SENIA team who's here. Can we give them like a virtual snap or applause? That would be fabulous. Thanks so much for sharing the work that you're doing, and y'all please check out their site and the resources and their virtual PDs. I know I've been to several and they've been really helpful in just empowering in my own practice. April at AIELOC, to close out and respect all of y'all's time. here are just what's going on this month, and you can access the link tree if, oh, thank you, Nayang, for posting it, for links to signups and everything to stay, and that link tree is updated regularly, so star it and bookmark it to stay informed. Christina, is there anything else you want to share or close out with?
No, I think you covered it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks again, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.